Hello, I'm Vanessa and I run several jewelry courses in London, and today we're going to make some jewellery. In this video, I will show you how to make wire wrap beads. You will need 4 sets of pliers. You will need a needle nose pliers, which is also called a chain nose pliers. You will also need a flat nosed pliers. You need some side cutters, or a top cutter would be fine, which is a different type of cutting pliers. And most essential, you will need a round nose pair of pliers. You will also need some beads. I have big beads, 15mm in size, but you can use smaller beads. You will also need some wire. You can use, and you should use as you're learning this technique, plated wire, silver plated wire. To begin, you take your wire and your round nose pair of pliers and you make a loop at the end of the wire. To make this loop, you hold the wire to the very end. And you want to position the wire a few millimeters from the tip of the pliers. This is the tip of the pliers. I've positioned my wire there and I'm holding the very end of the wire. And to check that you are holding the end, rub your finger on the other side and you should just about feel the end. Use your thumb to press the wire around the nose of the pliers like that until the length of the wire meets the end. I'm going to make what's called an eye pin, and to do that, I put the pliers back into the loop, use the very tip of the pliers, and hold the very end, very near the end of the wire, and turn it back. And that's called an eye pin. As you've noticed, I have not cut the wire. I'm using the entire length because it's a lot easier to wrap your bead if you have a long length of wire. Place the bead inside the wire. This technique does take some practice, so it is best if you use cheap wire. Now the bead is inside the wire, and on this side I'm going to position my pliers again a few millimeters from the tip, and I also have some gap in between the bead and the nose of the pliers. I'm making a loop again just by bending the wire around the nose of the pliers. I'm also turning the pliers with my finger and hand. So I've made a loop like that. Okay. Just put the pliers back in. Now I'm going to wrap this wire about maybe once or twice. I've made one spiral. I'm going to make a second spiral. Try to make the second spiral as close as you can to your first spiral. Now I'm going to take the pliers off and wrap this wire. Just wrap it around the bead like that until you get to the other side. Okay. And I've just wrapped around the first loop and making 2 little spirals. Use your side cutters to trim away as much of the wire as possible. So I'm trimming very, very close to the bead so that I have a very short end there. I use the needle nose pliers to squeeze that end in so that it becomes neat and seamless. And I'm also going to use the needle nose pliers to straighten out. And as you can see, this loop is a little bit uneven. I'm going to straighten that loop out by placing the pliers back inside the loop, straighten it. You could also use the flat nose pliers to do some final touches, like that. And there's your first bead. Here's another bead that I wrapped earlier. With this bead, I wrapped the wire around the bead several times. We're going to do an example of that. I make the little loop again, which is going to be an eye pin. I'm holding the end of the wire, bending it around the pliers. Turn that little hook out to make an eye pin. Thread your bead in. position the pliers again a few millimeters away from the bead so that you have a gap in between the bead and the pliers. Wrap the wire around the nose of the pliers and then do a spiral around the bead, the wire coming out of the bead. And then 2 spirals. Then I'm going to hold the bead in my hand and now wrap the wire around the bead. You have to hold the bead and guide the wire around it, so you're turning the bead and the wire at the same time. And I return to the end and wrap the end of the wire around the first loop, trim it with side cutters. Now when you're cutting with the side cutters, the blade of the cutters needs to be very close to your loop to ensure that you trim away all the excess wire. Then you take your needle nose pliers and you tuck in that little wire. And whilst you're there, you straighten out this loop. I'm also going to straighten out this loop. Here are some other beads I've wrapped earlier. This one has a fancy ending, so you can use the end of the wire to make that loop. Once you've wrapped your beads, you could begin to thread it and make something like that, a bracelet. So you could use the wire to make these fancy shapes and thread in your beads and have a lovely bracelet. And that's how you make wire wrap beads.